on your watch or clock, it's 4 or 4:02 or 4:05. So we will get started. I want to thank you all so very much for being here. I want to say this evening, but I'll say this afternoon. So I'm Deanne Lee, superintendent, at least for a few more days. And so this is special for me. It's one of my last events, and those who know me real well, if I start crying, it's too hard. I'm just going through a little grieving process, but that's all I'm going to say. So we thank you for being here tonight, because that's why I know you are here as well. Any of you who've been to any of our meetings, and some of you have been to many of our meetings, know that we always start with mission, vision, and values. And so besides seeing them posted here and there in different parts of the district, we do live and breathe our mission, vision, and values. It's not just something that we post on a wall. And one of the values that we live, breathe, and die by is that we value our stakeholders. And what I like to tell people about that is, there's a difference of having stakeholders, and you are all stakeholders. A stakeholder is just someone who has a stake in what we do. And you can have them, you can tolerate them, you can appreciate them, you can value them. And I want you to know that I truly value each and every one of you, and that especially includes our kids who are with us today, because that's what I'm here. So, as I said, I'm Deanne Lee. I would also like to introduce your superintendent in 17 or 18 days, Edie Martin. So she is here with us, of course, today, and we'll have a big role this evening. But I also have the privilege of introducing to you the gentleman who will be our new assistant superintendent. That is Mr. Dale Latham back here. And some of you might actually, he looks familiar, how do I know him? He has worked with our district in several capacities for several years. Mr. Latham works at the service center. And so he's worked with the board, he's worked with me, with Ms. Martin, even with staff in state interviews and things like that. So as he said, this just feels like home. Same thing for us. It just is like he just belongs here. It's not like he's new or anything. So you all come to know him and you grill with him. He just, I don't know, brings a level of comfort. So we appreciate Ms. Breeze getting things together for us today as far as reporting and all the technology as he does so well. So tonight is about an absolutely wonderful opportunity that we have. You know that, again, in our mission, vision, and values, our vision is to be the premier education organization. And we, again, constantly take strides to actually make that a reality. And what we have the opportunity for right now is to take advantage of to get us another step closer to it. And that is, you've probably heard about the stimulus funds. Depending on what you call it, CARES or ESSER or stimulus, it's all federal funds coming from Washington, D.C., which comes down to the state, which then filters down to us. The positive is, of course, it's a lot of money. The other part of that is there are many strings attached. Federal money, always, any money, but especially federal money, does come with, hi, how are you? Good to be here. You wouldn't mind signing in for us, and you can just sign there on the bottom instead of the back and make sheet of paper and make goodies. So we have several guidelines and things that will be a part of these funds. And so we want to make sure that we are good stewards of these funds and that we use them in a way that is going to meet the needs of our school district and our kids. And so that's why you're here tonight. Yes, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of talk and explaining from us, but we would like your input. So one of the first questions I would like to ask, and don't be embarrassed if the answer is no, we're just curious, how many of you received the survey that's sent out from the school district that asked about, we're calling it ESSER, so the ESSER funds and how to use them. Did anybody see that, take that survey? Okay, so a few of you, okay, that went out 2 weeks ago, was that right, this morning? And I think it went out on Facebook, Twitter, and email.
Yes, it was the individual email.
And I think actually even tweet, right? I mean, not
Text.
Text. Yes, okay. So if you missed that, then that's probably something at the beginning of the school year. We want to make sure that we have your correct information on Blackboard so that when important communication goes out, that we're sure we have the right connections for you. How many of you then were able to, you didn't just see it, but you filled it out? Again, it's okay, we didn't, this is just, we're just curious. Okay, good deal, thank you so much. So some of what you'll see is that feedback, that was to give preliminary information. But some of what Ms. Martin will cover is how we have actually been gathering this data for 18 months. Ever since spring of 20, when COVID broke out, we have been keeping all sorts of data and documentation and information, and we have had many, many meetings and committee meetings and gotten input all of that time. Surveys, meetings, all kinds of things. Many of you have served on those. And so I think Ms. Martin even has in one of her slides, one of the things that we've been told from our feedback that Millsap and the community appreciates is that we do seek your input, and then we do use that input in our decision making. So as I said, one of the requirements, there's many requirements with this. One of the requirements is that we have a back to school plan. Now, I want to walk you back to a year ago. This is what we did a year ago. It was how to safely return back to school. You know, were we going to wear masks or not? Would there be physical distancing? Would we, what were we going to have to do? So a few people are going to kind of flip out a little bit when they see that it's still going to be there this year. They have a much longer name now. Again, we're using the federal regulations words, but return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan. Now, the first thing is I'd like for you to understand, and then for you to help us tell others, don't worry, we aren't going back to all that stuff that we did all last year. If you remember, in most parts of the United States, people weren't in school, in many, many parts. And so here, we stepped ahead of most of the country. And we still very much honor and value the safety, and we do want to take precautions, and we'll be offering at the shot clinic at the beginning of the year, vaccinations for kids, anyone who would like them, not by any means forced to, and then anyone who still would like to continue wearing face coverings or anything, we honor and value that if that's how someone feels comfortable. However, the rest of the country, and even some of the state, they have not returned to school yet. So they are going through the same process that we went through a year ago to prepare to go back to school. So one of the requirements for us to have these funds is that we must have our return to school plan posted. Matter of fact, you even have to copy and paste in the application the URL. In other words, if we don't have a URL and then in Austin, they click on it and that plan doesn't pop up, we can't get the funds. So what we have in our plan, and part of the time to see and make sure we're all comfortable with this, we have said several times in our health and safety measures throughout the year that Millsap ISD honors and abides by the current Texas governor order. So, at the beginning of last year, that was, we're gonna wear masks. And then we saw what the TEA said. And then later in the year, it was, and most people didn't quite understand, still according to TE regulations, that face coverings were in place. However, a school board could modify that, and ours did. Because the governor's executive order, it was basically the process of, giving people the choice. Now, most of you know that the current Texas governor order says we are not allowed to require face coverings anymore. Even if we were to choose that, we are not allowed in any public buildings. You can't, demand or enforce face coverings. Now, private entities, private businesses and so forth, they can, but in public, they cannot. So, we have that on here. So in other words, one of the questions as we were going through some of these things, some of the trainings, people said, well, what if our district isn't wearing face coverings? Are we not going to get the funding? And they said, no, as long as you state the reason why you may not be, then that still shows that you have a plan. Well, the other thing that we have consistently talked about and knows that is a multi-stage approach for managing COVID. So what that means is we have had this chart all year where, for quite a bit of the school year last year, we had a high number of active cases in the county. Cases were increasing, and I can tell you, I looked every single day and monitored and tracked the number of cases. Also, how many beds were available in hospitals, all of those kinds of things. So therefore, all infection safety protocols were enacted to the greatest extent possible. And we're very aware that, some supported that and agreed with that, and some did not. But we were doing what was required of us and what we truly felt was best for the safety of our students and our staff. Then as numbers started to come down, in this area, I've been calling it orange. I'm really not quite sure what color that is, gold maybe, but anyway. So there were a moderate number of cases. They were increasing slightly or maybe even just staying steady. There were beds available. Now we still had cases. Matter of fact, just today, I heard of someone in a public office that they and their spouse have COVID. So it's definitely still there. For instance, today when I checked, I believe there's 42 active cases in the county. So we continue to check every single day and monitor. But there's increased flexibility in the safety protocol. So this was around March when the new governor's order came about that it was a choice. So in TEA, what they had said was all the other protocols had to stay in place, but a board could modify the face covering policy. And so that is in fact what ours did, but yet all the rest of the protocols stayed in place. Well, now consistently since then, there's a small number of active cases in the county. There was like 1 week that it peaked back up into about the 80s, but then it immediately came back down. It's been as low as in the 30s. Consistently, it's kind of been in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and gone up and down since then. So cases decreasing, and then more of these cases attributed to travel or close contact with a community source. In other words, not contracted in the school. That's something else that we monitored every single day, and every week I turned a report, into TEA, and then the head nurse turned a report into dishes. And so when we did our close contact, we could tell of the cases, which ones were as a result of contact at school and which ones were not. And I can tell you the vast majority, it was contacted from outside of school. So we have that data and information as well. So therefore, all of this, including plenty of beds available in hospitals, lead us to standard infection control protocols. What does that mean? Flu, stomach bug. What do we do every year? Wash your hands, cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze, so forth. So what we would have in place then, when school starts, unless something changes, which, you know, we had a lot of that last year, between governor's orders and guidelines and all of that, but it's been fairly steady here lately. But if nothing changes, then we would follow this, so we would continue to follow the standard infection control protocols. However, what the government will be able to see is if cases were to increase or other things were to take place, then we do have a plan in place that we can go back to. Doesn't mean we have to do the whole thing, depending on, let's say we moved up to moderate, then let's just say maybe, you know, the governor's order were the same, we still wouldn't have face coverings, but maybe we would do some physical distancing or whatever. Now, none of us anticipate that as more and more people have, are vaccinated and so forth. But I want you to know the two main things that we will be using. It's this, and then it's the most current governor's order. But we still have to have the plan posted. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood why it's there. I don't want that to be either a cause of concern or, you know, on the other side, of course, many people would love for those to still be enacted, and I don't want to falsely lead anyone that if they have, you know, a decision to make about coming back to school or not, I don't want to falsely have someone believe that we're going to be following all of those. So questions about that, why we're doing it, what it means, what might happen?
How do variants affect the protocol?
It would be if there were any increase in cases, even if it was a variant, that would still count as a case.
So, because one of the items, and we had this morning, we're talking about the variant from India and now straight out to the US. So how is it that occurring? It's difficult for this district to identify what is proper, what is right procedures, because all these, and when you feel it should be done, needs to be done is call whatever the local government as these procedures are. But I think that that's kind of something that needs to be considered. If you're saying that it's a concern, then it should be a concern. But I don't see how it can be addressed.
So are you saying, I want to make sure I understand the question. So if a variant is identified, so let's say someone is positive and it's a variant of COVID, but it's still COVID.
The variant, like one specific. Yeah. So I don't think it exactly. So right now, what you're identifying is the number of people that are being tested positive, but if none of them are being tested positive for the case from India, I don't see a big deal. But if they are, this for the parents as well. It's like, how does that get, you know,
Right.
because as far as I can tell, and I've been watching reading, is that Pfizer vaccine, they believe like the 80 to 88% that it'll protect the folks that have taken that vaccine. So, kind of believe.
And that's why we always make sure everyone understands we are not the medical experts. That's why we follow, there's kind of the organization chart, I guess you could say, for following command. President of the United States, the Governor of Texas, Texas Education Agency, local public authority, public health authority. And so what we do, matter of fact, we have our next scheduled meeting with the judge and the Parker County Health Authority is on Thursday. So we still meet every 2 weeks and we get the updates. And so then they give us really their standard or their guidelines of here's what it's looking like in the county, here's what we're doing. So they actually would be the ones to determine, so would this variant be considered COVID, how do we handle that? Is it gonna be with the same protocols? They would let us know how we're supposed to handle that. And so that's why it's so important for us to keep in touch with the authorities and why that communication, we are still doing that. They have different meetings now. This one in particular, yes, sir, it's with the area superintendents, but they have them also like with the mayors of the different cities. They have, I know, they have had some forums or council meetings where, you know, then it's open to the public and so forth. So in particular for us, though, they have a meeting scheduled with us, with the county superintendents to keep us informed. And then there's various ones throughout the county for different, open to different reasons. So, and the reason why they started that was in the beginning, they were meeting with the mayors and some of the other municipalities. The superintendents were invited, but we never had the opportunity to ask the questions that specifically related to schools. And because that was so different from, you know, what a city might be dealing with as far as their public places and so forth, we asked for our own group meeting with the judge, with the county health authority. So those kinds of things that you're talking about, I can almost guarantee you will be on that call.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes, sir. And that's why, you know, we too try to keep abreast of the news and the latest things. And matter of fact, I mean, I get an email from the Fort Worth emergency response system. We have a system. They send out an update every day and for sure every week. And then the ones we get from the county, we get every single day. And so they kind of have that other stuff in there too. But we wouldn't make that final determination medically because I don't have that knowledge.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I just all I want to hear about is that it gets addressed. It's just ties in this with here.
Right.
And,
Absolutely, and I appreciate that very much. Other questions?
If I could jump in as your resident scientist, I think that this multi-stage approach would still cover the variants because they would, even though not as many people would be protected, those numbers would still be reported as the cases to the county and to the state. And so we would, you know, in anticipation of something like that would pop up and they have the latest numbers so that would still, to me, serve as a solution.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. Dr. Mattis is on staff at Whitford College, and her husband's a doctor in the county. So I very much appreciate that. Inside, or what your opinion would be on that. Other questions? Or just input and statements? Okay. Well, at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Martin. We are the piece of paper that's in front of you. We'll talk a little bit about, if you see, so of course, everything we do, again, is tying it to our mission, vision, and values and our strategic plan. Because again, that strategic plan is going to get us to premier. So we have our different strategies in our strategic plan. And so you see those in front of you, but you see some proposed, and please notice at the top, draft. And Ms. Martin is going to tell you how did we get to those proposals. And it's based on that 18 months of input and data and meetings and all of that. One of the things I do want to go ahead and explain, and I'm sorry for the colors, but I did want a way to be able to explain to you. So when you see the ×3, that's because this grant is over a 3-year period. So when you see an amount, so let's say, for instance, a pre-K2 interventionist, and Ms. Mark will talk to school bit about what an interventionist is, but you see that salary, but then ×3. That's because the grant would cover that salary for 3 years. So you multiply by 3 years. So the reason for the color is there is an ESSER 1, an ESSER 2, and an ESSER 3. So ESSER 1 funds we received back in the spring. Well, so let's say we get our money from the state. Instead of giving us money on top of that, they gave us the money, but then they lowered what they usually give us. So the word we call that is supplanting. In other words, it was not additional funds, it was instead of. We weren't exactly happy with that. However, I will say, now the next set of monies that came were ESSER 3. Yes, I know we skipped 2 because the legislature, they were still talking about ESSER 2 and some of the requirements, we won't get all that. But so currently what we have available are ESSER 3 funds. We have 2/3 of those funds available to us right now. There's another 1/3 of those funds that they're still debating about, deciding exactly how that's going to happen. Then just 2 weeks ago, I believe, maybe it was just last week, I don't know how that goes, but the ESSER 2 funds opened up. Now, the same thing happened with the ESSER 2 funds. That, yes, we are getting some additional money, but some of the money the state had previously promised us, they actually are using our ESSER 2 money to pay for that. So in other words, they're doing that supplant thing again. So we have our amount, we subtract the amount that the state is keeping to cover those funds they were promising us, and so we have a smaller amount left. In ESSER 3 funds, they did keep 10% for administrative. So on this piece of paper, when you see at the bottom, 1.3 million approximately rounding, and then notice that TEA kept about 190. So we still have, over $1 million, which is very nice. But we also know they will do what they call settle up in the fall. So in other words, right now we're estimating how much TEA is going to take, but we will know for sure in the fall. And so it could be, more than this. And then we still don't know about that other 1/3 yet. So that's why I have the colors. So I wanted you to see that currently what we can cover with the funds we have available, that's in green. Green means go. Okay, so that's what we're working on right now is the application for those funds, depending on what y'all say tonight and if we adjust it. Then when we get the rest of the ESSER 3 funds, that would be what we would propose for the yellow. Now we do still have other funds available, local funds, what we call our Title I or other federal funds. We have some special state funds. So in other words, even if something ends up not being completely covered by the ESSER funds, then we still do have the funds available to cover that. So we believe we still need this to meet the needs of our kids, but we have a plan kind of A, B, and C, depending on, the monies that come to us. So Ms. Martin's going to talk about how did we get to this, and I'm going to go check to make sure we get the
Hello, good evening, and it's nice to meet you. Many of y'all I know, but a few faces are new. So if you don't know me, my name is Edie Martin. I have been Miss Lee's assistant superintendent now for 5 years, and I'm thrilled that next year we just get to keep carrying on the good work. Because while Miss Lee's going to be retired and vacationing, we're going to be here serving your students. Oh, she probably isn't going to do that. So what I want to show you tonight is we've done a series of data collection. Some of it's soft data, some of it's hard data. Now, what do I mean by that? Soft data, survey data. What do you feel? What are your perceptions? Where we talk to a variety of people, whether it's teachers or parents or community members or administrators. But then we have some hard data too, like concrete startup came back. And so I have more than I'll ever share with you. There is about, I don't know, 25 slides on this or so. I promise not to take all your time doing that, but I have enough available so that if you ask questions, I can go to the right slide. So we started planning and gathering data. Of course, we did it last spring, right? When we suddenly shut down school, we had to find a way to have school for our students. But then we got through the spring and actually very effectively compared to some other districts, we did a good job. But immediately started planning for this school year. So we started gathering data back in the summer last year when we were getting ready to come back to school in 2021. We then used that data and started school with our plan. And with every good plan, you have to watch and see if it works. So after the first 6 weeks of school, after we had implemented the plan, we started collecting data to adjust the plan. So that was with surveying parents. Matter of fact, one of the biggest surveys we ever have had since I've been in LSAT was about in October last year. We had 380 something responses, I think, high threes. And that was parents and teachers and telling us how the first 6 weeks went. So I have some of that data. And we use that data to adjust our plan and try to make it better for everyone, especially our kids. And then as the years started rolling, we started getting some results in. So we gathered some MAP data, some measures of academic progress, like are our students learning? And then we received some STAR data. And just now we've received some, not inclusive yet, but some regional STAR data. So we can start comparing our data to see how our kids did in comparison with everyone else. And by the way, it looks fabulous. I will share some of that with you. And so we started getting some hard data in, and right now we're here. We just sent out the survey to say, okay, now how do we plan again for next year and use these funds effectively? So I won't go through all that data, but all this is what we've been collecting and working with throughout the school year. Every one of us in education are new again. Okay, I had, well, I'll tell you, it's a long time, 26 years of experience. Next year will be my 27th, and I was new again. Ms. Horton, how many years do you have? 25th, and were you new again? So we were all using data to figure it out as we went along. I'm not going to go through every slide, but I want you to know that the impact, if you wonder how did COVID impact our kids, it ended up, we had 3 types of students, the way it worked. We had students who chose to come to school. We had students who chose to learn at home. And then we had this group that we didn't realize was going to be so big. It was your intermittent learners. Those were learners who they were at school for a while, but then they were home and then they were back at school. And that was for various reasons. Sometimes it was help with their family members. Sometimes they had been exposed to COVID. Sometimes there wasn't a health issue, but someone then was going in the hospital and they wanted to not send their kids to school for safety. So for a variety of reasons, our students missed, this is just fall data, they missed 9,584 to the best that we could calculate face-to-face days. The students continue to learn, and our data will show that, but it wasn't in a traditional format. It also did affect our attendance. Our attendance is typically right here, our in-person learners attendance, almost 96%, between 95 and 97% is typical, but you can see that our remote learners had a lower attendance than that. And part of that makes a lot of sense because some of the ones that were home were actually sick. So they didn't feel like logging in and doing their work. So we contended with 2 things. Part of it was being face-to-face, so we could pat on our students back and love on them and tell them good job. But part of it was also just their attendance in general. So I'm going to skip over here. This is our first of the year data when we sent out, after we started school year, 6 weeks in, we sent a little data. And I'm just going to sum up the next 2 slides. We learned a lot from that information. And I have a packet about this big all typed out that we shared with our staff and our teachers and our administrators. But 2 things really came up. One came up that our parents were using the online system dramatically. They were using it, you know, the things you could go online and you could see what the teachers were teaching in the videos. They were using it. So we got resounding positive results. However, our teachers said, we don't disagree that this is good, but it's killing us. They didn't say killing us. They said, we are doing our best. And I mean, kudos to our staff. They were amazing, but they couldn't keep up with the work because now all of a sudden they're teaching in 3 modes instead of 1. So that's when we came back and changed the calendar. You remember that we had put in some extra days, some Friday afternoons for our staff to have some planning time. We actually designed, thank you, Elizabeth. She worked and had students here. And so if you didn't have a way for your kids to get home, they could stay in school. But that was one major change that we made to try to give our staff more time. Also in that survey, She was taking care of me in case this didn't work. I forgot, thank you, Ms. Bradshaw. Also, what came out here is that our parents resoundingly said the communication and the effort the school district was given was very positive. On the backside, it was very difficult. It was very difficult for every family, I'm sure, and I know every one of us here at school. But we started getting some data that we could make the novice system better, and we think we did. This is the part that I really want you to see. We planned, we implemented the plan, then we checked our data, made some tweaks, made some adjustments. Then our data started rolling in. So I'm going to show you, I probably won't show you all 4 of these, but what I have here is I have our 3rd through 8th grade STAR data. STAR is the mandatory test the state has this tape. So I have 3rd through 8th reading and math. And so I have Millsap compared to Millsap over the last 3 years, so we can see how we did compared to ourselves. And then for this, let's say math STAR data grades 3 through 8, I also have us compared to the region. So I can see, like, everybody talks about the COVID slide. Have y'all heard about the COVID slide? It's not a dance move. The COVID slide, the COVID slide in general means our students academically are losing ground. That's kind of the lingo that you're going to hear. We felt like we knew that would probably happen, but we needed to know, are our kids academically losing ground as much as everybody else? Or are we losing more ground? Or are we not losing as much ground? So our data is going to be very interesting to look at. So I have that for math and reading, and then I have it for the ESSER, which is just the high school math and reading. So it covers every grade level in the basic literacy skills. The reason we chose math and reading is because one of the commitments we made, not that social studies and science and so on and so forth is not important, but we made a commitment during COVID that we have to ensure our students have basic literacy skills. So that's what we focused on, math and reading, math and reading. We did everything, but we wanted to make sure they didn't slide in those areas. So let me show you the first one. This one makes sense. Okay, so this is Millsap compared to Millsap. I know it's math, but it's in the top right of the screen. Do you see it? Is that big enough for y'all to see? Yeah. Basically, I want you to look here at the bottom. We have 2018 data, then we have 2019 data, and then we had COVID in 2020. That was spring. We didn't have school, no testing. And then we have this year's data. So what happened in grades 3 through 8 in math, the way the state does it, they used to say passing or not passing, right? Y'all remember those days? You either passed or you didn't. Well, now it's not about that. It's a scale. Approaches means you're passing, but you're at a low level passing. Then you can be passing at needs or masters, meaning those are higher levels. So the state, to get our score, basically what they do is they say, well, we take all 3 of these numbers, 81 plus 49 plus 18, we add them together and divide by 3. Because we want you as a school district to make sure your kids are not only passing, but working high. So in our math, in 2019, we had a raw score, it's called, of 49.3. And then in 2019, we went up to a 55.0 because not only has COVID been going on, but our principals and our teachers have been working so hard to up the level of education that your students get. And we can see that it's working. And then in 2021, we skipped COVID year. And in 2021, our score was 54.3. So in the corner, you're going to see that we declined just a little. Did everybody follow that? If you can understand that, you're going to understand the data. Because remember, we expected to decline. But our goal was to make sure that we didn't decline any more than anybody else, because then our students have an equal playing field, right? So that's in math as compared to ourselves. Now, don't let this confuse you. The yellows, that is what I just showed you. That wasn't highlighted. That's Millsap compared to Millsap. But now we have regional data. You see the grays, 2018, the gray going down regional. So what's circled is 50.3. And we had 49.3 back in 2018. When we compare ourselves to the region, we were actually not at 100% of the region. We were below the region back in 2018, and we knew that. But then in 2019, we worked really hard, and look, we were 106% of the region. In other words, Region 11, Mr. Latham, you work at Region 11. How many school districts does that involve?
76 independent school districts in Region 11.
Thank you. 76 school districts. So compared to the 76 school districts in our area, we actually outperformed them in grades 3 through 8 math. And then what we really wanted to know was, we know we declined a little bit in 2021, but how much did we decline? Well, this is what I think the proof is in the pudding, as they say, that our efforts are tremendously working. Kudos to you guys who are in here and our kids who are doing it. We declined, there's our 50.4, but look how much the region declined. They were 50.3, 52.0, and now they're 39.3. So COVID impacted our kids. We were not quite as strong as we were last year. But on an array in that, it didn't quite impact us like it did everybody else. So we're calling that a plus, because we want to hold our own and keep going. So that, I believe, is kudos. So I did that for each. I did that for each math, grades 3 through 8, Millsap compared to Millsap, and Millsap compared to the region. In reading, we did the same, Millsap to Millsap, and Millsap compared to the region, and then we did it for our high school courses. So not to get too deep into the data, and we'll go back and look at it if you want to, but here's what I want you to know. Are y'all back, right? What are y'all saying? We got Karen, one of our math teachers, and there's one of our principals right back there that did it too, and there's a whole lot of our kids in here that did it. And that wasn't easy, because think of the absences we had, and think of the at-home learning. Everybody was going above and beyond. What's your name?
One of our teachers over there.
Yeah.
And then numerous staff members, and there's several staff members here.
Well, and
Thanks all of us.
I mean, there's a staff member back there that had your kids here every day on Friday afternoon when the teachers were planning. She offered a place for them to come. So, I mean, it takes a village, and every one of us.
And keeping everybody safe and clean, you know, and healthy, so thanks everybody.
So this is what the data told us. In math, we declined compared to ourselves a little bit, but we grew tremendously compared to the region. And you saw that, I think, 38% of the region. Same thing in reading in our younger grades, 3 through 8. We didn't decline compared to ourselves. We actually grew, because there's a lot of other things going on besides just COVID all the time. We're trying to get better, we're trying to get better. We actually grew compared to ourselves. So our students, compared to our own students, grew academically, which is awesome. And then we grew compared to the region. Now, in the high school, you're going to see a little bit different trend. While you're not here, we lost a little ground. End of the course in math is basically algebra 1. So we lost a little ground compared to ourselves, but compared to the region, we grew tremendously. And then in English, you can see this is what, just unsurprising. I'm actually surprised it wasn't more like that. In high school English, which is English 1 and English 2, we lost ground compared to ourselves, and we lost a little bit of percentage compared to the nation. So that was a lot of data, but basically, if we're a results-oriented district, we love better than anybody I've ever seen. But we all want to make sure we're producing students who can compete, right? So they can do anything they want to do when they get out of school. And so this right here, to me, says that our efforts and hard work, and everybody's exhausted now, but work. Our kids did not lose ground. And Marla looks like she's about to cry. This is what it does. And that's how I felt when we did the data, because we didn't know how it was going to look. So we started the year with the best plan we could. We took some assessment data, some soft feedback. We made some changes. We started getting STAR data in, and we felt positive about it, but we didn't know until we started getting regional data in. This will not be solid until the end of this month. We don't have all regional and state data in. This is still in draft format. That's why it says draft data. But we have thousands and thousands of pieces of data in, so we feel confident that this is about how it's going to roll out. So I'm going to pause for just a minute. Questions so far? Thank you. Yes, sir. Until later, if y'all want to see the percentages, I'll be happy to show you, because it's great.
And Miss Martin will really get into that.
We like it to show. There's tell a story. That's the
Other
only reason.
comments or questions? We would really like to know how y'all feel, or questions, or does anyone want to see anything more specific? How do you feel about what you just saw? And I don't mean, we're not looking for bragging, we just mean in correlation to, you know, this plan, how we spend our funds, that kind of.
I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the support from you guys and administration.
because whatever we needed, you supplied. That we had questions asked, you just be prepared to support us, and that's so. And the parents are phenomenal. I just can't emphasize the support that we got from our parents, and the phone calls, emails, minds. And no doubt, we always have, it takes a village, but this year when we had, and I can go back and show you, so many percentage of our students first semester that were either at home learning or were in and out learning, there were those intermittent learners. This is not North IC status, this is the community of North status. This is what we have done together. And what we want to make sure we do is keep on doing that. We got to figure out what works, just like what you just said, Ms. Courtney, and we got to keep doing it. And that's what this survey data is. This last survey we just did, we only had 108 people respond, but I had lots of, because most of it was narrative, so I have lots of papers with handwritten stuff that I was able to combine and look at and consolidate. This is what our stakeholders currently think we should do. Now, not all these stakeholders know how the results of the first of the year came through. They haven't seen all that data yet, but everybody has their own personal story, so they know what works in their household with their students. And the first question was rank the highest priority. And I'm going to go ahead and put the numbers over here so that you can see. The highest priority was to support students' academic needs with small group instruction. 71 people said that. Almost twice as many as said support student social emotional needs, but social emotional and academic needs were things that came through the survey over and over again. Then you can see there was some other support, and it had parentheses, technology and facilities, about half as many said that. And then there was just a few who said some of the other things. So that was question one. It was a lot on small group instruction and social emotional needs. I know there were some who talked about technology and facilities. Here's one of the questions we have. Technology and facilities is broad, right? So one of the things in here is furniture. So that can be considered facilities because that's moving, that's furniture that is adaptive for small group instruction, or we can do groups of 3, or we can do groups of 4, and you can change it on the fly. It's very lightweight, it's very comfortable for students. The comments throughout, you're going to see in a minute, about technology was that this year, and of course this makes a lot of sense, that technology was too much. We need more social interaction. We need more hands-on learning. But I don't know exactly what this means. Other supports, your highest priority, or other supports, technology and facilities. Can y'all help me with that? What do people mean by that?
Yes, as a parent.
Yeah, I'm saying who has an idea on that?
So when I was when I was in high school, I was enrolled into, had just started that year, CDE design. And what it was a certain number of teachers that were locked into that program, and also a selection of students in the high school. And what it was focused on the sciences and engineering. And so that was funded through prior students that had went to the high school. So this is different from how it's getting funded, but what they did was they purchased calculators, behind calculators, and those were primarily for the mathematics courses, the science courses, and they also use those monies for taking the students to get them aware of what's actually really out there. Now, those instructors remain the same if they were able to, like, for example, the mathematics,
Yes.
the English. But the core courses were also graphic.
Yes.
So not only was it that, they also branched out and asked the prior students that were funding the program to also allow job training for the students. So the students were able to go out and work on the last class, so we could go and do that as well.
So that's what you're thinking, people, other supports, you're thinking they need the integration of some of those technology, well, skills, but jobs that you're doing.
Right, and one thing that I think that would really benefit, and this is my personal thought, but I'm aware that there's other high schools that have the opportunity to chime in with, and like Google and stuff. Like those that they're coordinating with schools, so that there can be bigger, more opportunities for the students in the sciences and whatnot. I think it would be a good opportunity to there is ways to try and touch base with them and say, hey, look, you know what? We'd like to start a program. Can you guys help us? Can you guys what is it? You know, what would you recommend? They can actually build more ideas on the student work.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I grin at Dr. Sinatus because she works at Weatherford. I guess I thought they did. She works at Weatherford College because one of the things our high school does very well is they do those partnerships already. Now, we don't have CAD currently, but we have a lot of technology-based, but other-based, medical-based and things that we partnered with Weatherford College. We partnered with Weatherford ISD, we partnered with Mineral Wells. We're always seeking those partnerships. So CAD is certainly something that we should look into.
We also have what's called a Career Technology Education Advisory Council, or council committee, whatever, but it is made up completely of business and community members and Weatherford College and others. That is exactly like what you're talking about. They come to us, they give us ideas how we can better prepare our kids for their business. And it's a variety. It may be the medical field, it may be the business field, it may be the computer field or the technology, whatever.
Right.
And so we do, and we have some great partners for that. And we're always looking to expand that.
Right, yeah, that's a big thing. I think that, also introducing like these, those smaller technical fields that a lot of students just, that are out there that they're so well paid, like someone that was on computers. It's a technical field, and they make like $8 an hour.
Yes.
There's great jobs out there.
Certifications. Thank you for that input. I thought we had one other too, input.
One of the things that I was the crisis counselor for the last year throughout COVID, so one of the things that I noticed going up to the schools, counseling this year, is, and I talked to a lot of parents, when the students had to go home, they get them onto the technology by themselves, or, they may be a lower SES and not having the internet. So providing those jetpacks, providing enough iPads or, Chromebooks, whatever it is the schools use, having enough of those, and then they get broke, and then they have parent phones to do this. So that could be some part of the other technology. It's just the availability and being able to monitor and self-regulate their own.
That's really a very good punch because our data shows that. Here in a minute, it does say some stuff that, just like you said, it talks about, we were one-to-one. Every student had their own Chromebook. That's what we did. The youngers had Chromebooks they could touch, turn over like a pad and touch, and the older kids had Chromebooks they could type on. We did have to add some Wi-Fi, some little hotspots, if you will, so they could get internet. But even with that, and we have two different companies. We use AT&T, I believe, and Verizon for some others. But even with that, we have some families that don't live in good reception areas. So sometimes one wouldn't work and we give them the other and it would work, but sometimes neither one of them would work. So is there any other ideas? Those are both great feedback. Yes, thank you.
Kind of going on that, I was gonna add that as well, and there's, Millsap being in a rural area, there is a lot of places that they don't have Wi-Fi, or they live with grandparents, they don't wanna, get Wi-Fi or Spanish speaking parents only that they don't understand how to get on the computer. Some, some parents may not have a computer at all or a phone that does that. Maybe sometime in the future, Millsap could have like maybe a computer lab that's available to the public for parents or something. Because that was one thing that I did help a lot with, was to help with registration with some parents because they didn't have computers at home to do that with. That way they can come in, they can check parent portal, maybe emails, or maybe even apply for jobs. If that's a need that they have, that we can do.
I love that, thank you.
So I was teaching over the past year because most people know that they had to go to libraries and libraries and those too. So they were just left completely without.
So we did something that was, there are some silver linings, right, in COVID, as horrible as it was and continues to be. There were some things we were able to do, like our high school now and a hotspot. Like if you go to the high school parking lot, it's open. Not that you want to go sit in your car, but if you needed to go sit in your car and do some work. And Miss Lee, am I correct? It's open right now to anybody. You can go park in the parking lot because we don't have a McDonald's or somewhere here in Millsap you can go to. But you can go to the high school. That's something we installed after in the spring when COVID first hit. But we need to advertise that more, obviously, so people know it. I'll show you a couple of more pieces of data here. We asked about the most pressing need, and this is interesting. It kind of goes with what you said. These were very close. Notice the top three, 34, 32, 31. So there wasn't any one big standout. But what's the most pressing need? Training for parents and families to support students' social, emotional, and mental health. And Elizabeth, tell the community real quick about the village. And tell them what you did with the village and how we might can interact that.
Oh, okay, well, for example, one thing we did is we partnered with Texans for Covering Together, and they came during the zone and they did an hour with some of our older kids, and they did counseling group, which was really good. But not only do they do that for the students, they also offer it to parents free of charge. So that's something that we could refer parents to them, give them a flyer or business card or something for them to call.
Thank you. Thank you, efficient spot. That's a big one. And Con Valley, we partner with some entities that provide social and emotional support for our students. But obviously our parents need some of that to know how to help their kids at home. Also, create more time for learning. If any of you are doing the summer camp extravaganza this summer, we're starting to try to provide some extended time for those who opt to come. And then some tutorials. And that would be like after the school day, some supplemental learning things that we know we might be able to provide. And then just like Ms. Gordon said, resources, make sure we have the resources we need to support students, social, emotionally, and obviously academics as well.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So these five with, for example,
Uh-huh.
these five are the ones that have are currently selected all five of them?
These five are the things that parents could choose from.
Okay.
The state is actually.
So it's one out of five, which one is it?
Yes, and it actually, if you look at the plan, we probably got a little bit, Ms. Lee talked about the plan, we'll talk about that more. There's a little bit of a lot of these in here, but we needed to know what you guys needed, what the community needed, what the families needed. And so if our plan's not meeting the needs, we need to go back and tweak our plan like we've done throughout the year. So these are some things we put on the board. We said, let me go back, we said highest priorities, most pressing needs, and this was a common survey throughout Region 11. This is what a lot of people sent. Then we actually had some narratives, like tell me what you think about the challenges, what were the social emotional impacts on students and families, what supports do you suggest Millsap ISD provide? And so all this was narrative. There was no guidance in the answers. Interestingly, on supports we should provide, you notice because you give an open-ended question, there's only 13 people who said this, and 11 that said this, and 10 that said this, but you're seeing some overlap. Social emotional interaction, more face-to-face learning, and less technology. And that kind of ties into what we said a while ago. Actually, nobody, I don't know that I would say nobody, very, very few bashed the technology. Everybody, the whole feeling of the survey was, okay, we've done that, and we need social interaction. Our students are missing that interaction. They need to socially talk. There was a lot of verbiage about hands-on, so students actually having face-to-face instruction. Academic learning support, such as more time, small group, one-on-one learning, those things are some things that our families have.
I just I'd be curious to know, the ones that filled their survey out, how many of those had their child at home the majority of the year, and how many had the child at school?
So I know I had 93 parents. They checked the box parent, but they can check multiple boxes. Like last year, I was a parent and an employee, but we had 93 parents fill it out. I think we had 13 employees fill it out, but we didn't go as deep as what you just said. Like how many were remote learners, and because they didn't put their names, of course, we can't track it.
Because I could see them putting more face to face if they were an at-home learner and only getting to log into Zoom twice a week or whatever. So I can understand why that response.
Although if you think about,
But on the flip side of that,
Yes.
I have one at each campus,
yeah,
and my elementary kids, on multiple occasions, they don't work on paper. They only work on their tablet. And where my middle schooler did a lot on paper, when he was in class, he was one of the kids that was quarantined, so, then he became online. But that was one of the things, I was one of those that said less technology, because for the ones that were facing,
yes, yes.
because, like my younger two were, writing and all of that, they really didn't write much. They typed, and which, yeah, great, their typing skills were great, but now their penmanship is gonna go to the plus boys, so that, but that was one of the things that even my fourth grader even said, I'm trying to just make this paper. And I have to talk to the teacher and say, can I have this paper?
And I'm seeing lots of heads shake as she said that. Seeing lots. That was probably, we have unintended positive consequences, but we also have unintended negative consequences. I'm gonna go back to our teachers teaching 3 modalities of instruction. We have them here, we have them at home, we have one in and
Well,
out.
and I saw even at
That may be it.
middle school, that difference too, and the struggle with that of, them trying to do paper in school, but then also teaching online, and so, I know it's difficult, but it's also difficult on kids.
It is. I think that that's something that, touche, exactly right. And we don't want to lose all technology skills. Obviously, we're in the 21st century, but we want kids to be engaged in school and enjoy it, and obviously social interact. That's something that we can do without cost. That doesn't even have to be tied to here. And this is a great thing that came up. Make sure the students are engaged and we're hands-on learning and we're interacting. Yes, ma'am.
So, one thing that the survey shows, and it looks like your plan reflects, is that social emotional support. And I was gonna mention, like, even the Texas Recovering Together, it's a grant funded program, so it expires this month. And so there's actually a bit of a mental health care crisis, especially for children and adolescents going on, and the more rural you get, the more dire it gets. There are not enough providers for the children, there's just not enough care to go around. And COVID created a unique situation which dramatically affected the mental health of our children. And so I guess seeing that this survey of your plan reflects that is really encouraging, because the social emotional crisis intervention counselor, I think is going to be really vital, because that has a part to play too in our children, achieving academically. So I think that that's great, and I think that kind of ties into with them having that social interaction with their peers, because sometimes these counselors can set up those opportunities for them to build that social supports that are encouraging for students. So I just really think that's great.
Thank you. The word did come up, depression, and I don't know if it made it on here, because I actually circled words and tried to put only the ones that were on so many times. But students in depression came up pretty often in the survey.
So we are something together.
Welcome.
That is us, but yeah, just, yeah, we're sorry, we're worried about that.
It's been a blessing.
Okay, well, but yeah, just to echo what she said, with our program ending in like 2 weeks, it's been very nerve-wracking for us, because, there's so much talk right now about how like the mental health crisis, second, like wave of the pandemic. And so it's very encouraging to see y'all hiring someone. It's something that I think keeps us up at night sometimes as, you know, we serve, I mean, we serve that are not hundreds of kids. And it's like, so what's gonna happen to those kids next year? So the fact y'all have a plan to cover that is very encouraging.
On the other hand, we are, the term they use is we are phasing in. Okay, so that means that crisis counselors such as myself and Kelly are not going to be going without the public program. However, Pond Valley and other MHMRs or mental health facilities that have got the grant will continue to service people that call together and all kinds of time. And also we have developed a Facebook web page that is on Pond Valley. And everything that we have built as far as a training or educational things that we did in the summer. Resources, everything that we collected over the last year and every educational PowerPoint training we considered is going to be on that webpage and available for anybody who wants to. Yeah, it's a whole school. So it's all free for parents, teachers,
Parents.
yeah.
And how's that really do in school?
So we were able to have the capacity to come into the schools over the past year. We provided free counseling. It was nice. It's been great for counseling to families, students, parents, teachers even.
You know, like, just on my own, sure. Hear things and see things and they keep a lot of themselves. Sometimes we make these difficult people. That communication, dialogue. But there's things that don't, there's only so much going on. So it's why it's good to know that you guys, the schools, I'm almost myself wondering. I'm sure they have to be, there has to be someone they can go to that they trust. Most of my sons, always trust their parent, they're letting their parents.
Well, someone who doesn't live here is anything, but y'all are in good hands. We work in a lot of schools as counselors and your teachers and staff really care about students. Everyone else are gonna stay cold here.
Thank y'all.
Well, and real quick, I wanted to say, I had a question for y'all. So the memorandum of understanding we currently have, where y'all come to the school, is that with the Texans Recovering Together that's going away? So y'all will no longer be able to come to the school?
That's
Okay, all right. And then I wanted to make sure, so for both of y'all, there's also the end of the year surveys on each campus that we do with students, parents, and staff. And so what we do with those, matter of fact, Ms. Bradshaw's meeting was today with me. But I meet with each principal. I do the same thing with those surveys that Ms. Martin has done with this survey. And we see how do the results correlate with what kids said, parents said, students, parents, staff said, but then also how does that correlate with each campus? And that's how kind of our priorities and like the principals, each principal has goals that they work on throughout the year with the superintendent. And then, of course, as a district, we have goals, and that often comes out from these surveys as well. And so let's say, for instance, Ms. Williams, when you talked about like the overuse of technology, I can tell you that that was one of the things that was prevalent in each of the campus surveys, pretty consistent, students, parents, and staff. So that is already a very, very high, I don't know if I could say the highest priority, because obviously taking care of the COVID learning gap would be the highest priority, and of course the social emotional wellness. But I would say definitely in that top three, it's
to gear down a little bit from the technology, get back to that small group interaction, hands-on. Matter of fact, this summer is already a good example of that. In some of the classrooms that you go into now, that, we very, very much encourage, let's get back to small groups, let's get back to the hands-on and that kind of thing. So I just wanted y'all to know that we also are using those surveys at the end of the year, and many of those said the same thing that was in some of this. So it's all coming together. So we're hearing that voice.
Yeah, we have two comments. I think she wanted, and go ahead.
I just kind of wanted to add a little bit to the social emotional side of that as a teacher, from that aspect. I know COVID did play a huge role in that, obviously being quarantined, being away from other people. But as a teacher, I saw a lot of social, emotional, just anxiety, just depression in general from students that were even in school, because they felt so pressured to get caught up from where, we fell so far behind during COVID last year. Trying to, to make sure that we're not losing ground, we're gaining ground with the students. And I think as a teacher, we were trying to teach so many different ways and so many different directions that sometimes we lost track of the fact that we were working with children, I think, this past year. And so that kind of slipped through the cracks, I think, a lot this year. We lost sight of what was most important. Because we were focusing on academics, getting them what they needed, making sure we had enough grades, making sure that we had contact with the parents, that we were doing. There was just so much going on. I think that social emotional relief kind of, affected the face-to-face kids just as much as well.
Well, and no doubt, we would probably be amiss if we didn't say our teachers and you and me, we were all under stress this last year. And so stress, when we're under stress, it affects how we treat others, always. And I think every one of us was under stress. And we had, across educators near to us, we had people who lost family members. We had teachers trying to do multiple jobs. And that's why, I'm so glad that our new crisis counselor will not only get to serve students, but then we'll get to serve adults if needed as well. So thank you for that.
Is there only going to be one crisis counsel?
At this point, what we have is each campus already has a counselor. So this is a counselor that is in addition to that, and they will do, our counselors are almost administrators in the education world that we live in. Now, I'm not speaking about middle staff. I'm saying in general, counselors, they counsel and they do small group things with kids, but they do a lot of testing and they do a lot of 504 meetings and supporting parents. This is only one, that it is a one full-time, only social and emotional counselor. So the bang for your buck on that, when they do nothing but counsel, I think will be very large. Is that what you're going to say, Wanda, as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
But I just think we need more counselors for kids, because some kids are comfortable talking to the same women, so I'm comfortable talking to them. Like, I think we need a little diversity for those kids to be able to express themselves.
Awesome.
That's a good point. And one of the questions we asked on our survey to the kids on each campus, do you have at least one adult that you trust on the campus to talk to? And one of the things, so like when we talk about the surveys, we look at glows and grows. And I can tell you one of the glows on each campus was an extremely high percentage. I'm talking either in the high 80s into the 90s on each campus, that the student response was yes. They had at least one adult, much less two. Okay, do you have a friend? And nearly everybody says yes. And we all know from research and statistics that that is an area, an indicator of if someone does have an issue, if they have at least one important person in their life that they can go talk to, that is very helpful to perhaps avoid a crisis situation, or at least that person can then go get help for that person. So I did think that that was a strong statistic on each.
So we talked a lot about the plan, about the money, about the regulations. We talked about our data over the year. We touched on a lot of different things, but we don't want to assume that we touched on everything you're thinking. So is there anything that you want to put on the table that you think North ISD needs to ensure our students are successful? Remember, we believe in the whole child. That's physical, mental, emotional, academic, the whole child. What is it we need to continue serving our students and helping them be successful?
Oh, great. We're going to bring additional ideas onto the table, what's already been proposed.
Sure. I mean, yeah,
That's why we're here.
If there's
It's
something,
already
that-
said.
yeah, and I know you said, but if there's something you think we need to be doing, we want to know. We're only as good as our little mind. We're only as good as people we talk to.
We're just explaining to you the results of the data, what the majority said, because obviously there's only a certain amount of money.
Right.
And so we try to go with what the majority have talked about.
Gotcha. Because I did not participate in that, so that's why I'm kind of like, oh, what I think.
Sure.
But I know. So let me ask you this. What is the current, I don't know what the official, are all the students required to come back this next? Starting this summer?
So let me answer that with a somewhat of an answer and a little bit of a grace mark. You remember the Miss Lee, what she showed you the colors, right? We are in yellow right now, and we've been in yellow for quite some time. I believe we're going to stay in yellow. That's what things look like right now. So we have decided this thus far based on some other surveys and some other feedback. This year, we started the year, if you'll go back into the fall and think about how we were when school was starting in August, you know, many people wasn't even starting school and things were very much unknown, unstable. And so we gave people a choice. But in giving people a choice, that helped some families, but it also produced great hardship at best on staff and students who were here, and therefore because staff might have been stressed even on students that were here. But we thought that was the right thing to do. So we did that, and as the year moved forward, we started, and then in December, we still had, that's not only first semester data you see, because as the second semester came, there started being less people at home and less people at home. We really did not end the year with hardly anybody at home in either mode, whether they were at home because they wanted to be, or if they were home because of quarantine, or because they had the virus. So because of those reasons, we're one of the few holdout districts. A lot of districts quit giving options midway through the year or as the year went on. We felt like we'd given our word. We want to continue that throughout the year. But our data very clearly shows there was a learning distinction. Kids who were here were learning and their attendance was better, and kids who were at home, the data shows that they weren't learning as much and their attendance wasn't as much. So, you know, that's kind of interconnected. So we have chosen, there's 3 modes of teaching and learning: face-to-face, at home, because I want to be at home. I'm choosing to be at home. That's for my family. And then we have intermittence, the one who, like, they can come in and out. We will have face-to-face. We will not have those who choose to stay at home because they're going to choose to stay at home because they're scared of COVID. Because we as a district can't manage that. But we're still dealing with that third one, that what do we do with students who are quarantined or students who not have the virus? But the funny little thing about this one is the last 6 weeks, we had an opportunity to try something. We actually, because our parents didn't want their kids at home. It's like they wanted them to be in school. I don't mean they didn't want them at home. They wanted them to be at home during play hours, not during school hours. And so we actually hired somebody to have them here every day. So if a kid got sick or was exposed, they could stay here and we would monitor them. Miss Lee, I bet we didn't have 5 kids in there, the whole, right?
Now, I want to explain, it was an isolated area. Yeah, it was an isolated area. The adult had been vaccinated. And so all the protocols were still in place. Face covering, physical distancing, everything. And they were isolated, all of the coming and going. There was a restroom that only they could use, food was brought to them. I mean, they were not amongst the general population. But of the entire, I guess the last 5 weeks, we did that or so, it was only used 3 or 4 days. In other words, and the way we did it was, by parent request, if they would rather their child be at school than be home. And so they were given the choice. So part of that was, I think during that whole time period, we had 2 cases. And then one of those cases, there were several quarantine, due to like they rode the bus or some of that kind of thing. But with the parents having the choice, there still weren't very many who chose. They just decided to go ahead and do most of them did like the 10 days. And then if they weren't showing any symptoms, they could still come back to school with face covering and so forth.
And actually, we're just having less and less. So the short answer is yes to face-to-face. No to, I want to be at home learning because we don't have the capacity to do that right now. And we're still considering that third option. It may not even be something we have to consider because by the time school starts, most everyone will be vaccinated. Kids may have a choice to be vaccinated. There will be very few people that fall into that third category. So that's the unknown at this point.
And actually, currently, we don't have that option because the state's already said it will not be funded. One of the things that the legislature was making the decision, and we really thought, matter of fact, it was quite a shock, that one of the bills did not pass that would in some way fund that. Let's say, for instance, Denton ISD, who we highly respect, they have an outstanding superintendent and just everything about their system is quality. And so they were actually creating an online academy. And we had already had preliminary discussions about doing a memorandum of understanding with them. For those, I would, for a very, very small percentage, the online does work well. We, as Smart said, we just don't have the capacity to create that to the quality that we felt that it should be. However, the legislature did not pass a bill to fund that, to fund the, every time a student comes to school, that's how we get our funding.
Right.
And so last year they funded for children to be learning. That's why we had that whole system of making it online. It was so we could go home too, and make sure the kids were learning, of course. So anyway, they took away that option this year. So it really would not be a viable option for us to offer that because we would lose so much money.
Right, and that's, I just want to know what it was. Thank you for that explanation. So one of the questions that I did see that there was an item there for assisting teachers, is that correct?
Yeah, there was, let me go back, because we didn't go through all the data, but we did this for us, so we know. One of the things the stakeholders said, there was 10 different people who said in some regard that the district should make sure we provide teacher supports. And some of the examples they provided was such as additional staff to meet students' academic needs, learning tools, like if Ms. Horton said, if she needs something to learn with, that the district should try to provide that.
I think that's really good because one of the had a lot on the workload stuff. And we need to be able to focus more on students. I don't know if it means also giving assistance with doing some support. I don't know if it's like, that's why I was just trying to ask her what kind of support is it. But that is very good.
I think our teachers deserve everything.
And all of that, but if the teacher has more time to actually truly focus on the students, then ultimately they will be better. It also brings their psyche. They also do well.
And that's why we're here. Our teachers, you should have heard them talking about, like, it was hard on the students, But our teachers, it was hard on our teachers when there wasn't anybody here to teach. You know, they miss their babies. They miss their, and I don't mean babies just because they're little. I mean, they're high school babies. They miss their kids because the people they love wouldn't take care of.
So,
So thank you for that.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping, but, so before we jump to number 5, we're actually on number 2, so we skipped 3 and 4. So I wanted to see what they were.
So here's what I would like, how about Ms. Martin, would you like to go ahead and explain then how the survey results correlate with the plan?
Of course, and I can stay after and show you anything you want to know. That's why they're here. I just figured y'all might be kind of tired of seeing all that data. But they say some of the basic same stuff. They say overall, our outcomes were good. Our students learned. Social, emotionally, our students are hurting and they need some support. It says that we want more time in individual one-on-one small group interventions for academics. And it talks about supporting emotionally. When you look at how that,
I just think that part is gonna take care of itself with the change of COVID, because I know for me, I didn't do all of the extra hands-on group work, you know, get together with a group of 4 and pass the paper around and do this or the task cards. And I just think a lot of that's gonna be taken care of itself now that we've moved past the COVID.
And I think even a small group work with teachers, it also changes the student attitude because there's more focus, I guess, attention on them where you can see, you know, if something's up with the kid, you go, hey, is he good? You know, where I don't feel like that was last year. Last year, it was kind of like a blur. It wasn't, there wasn't a lot of, you know, I mean, I know at the elementary, I think almost every elementary teacher hugs their kids. And I, you know, and watching them not be able to, or even go, oh, we can take this on, you know, was really hard to see. And I think that in and of itself will help the kids socially and emotionally because, you know, they're already confused because not only whatever their parents' view was of COVID, you know, and then going to school and the difference of everything else, and then, okay, well, you know, what's this student like? You know, that, right, especially in elementary, you know, and just that hands-on feeling with the teachers, I think will definitely help.
I believe you're exactly right. We teach a lot and we tout a lot of teaching about hands-on, small group, that's quality teaching. And then all of a sudden we couldn't do those things during COVID. So all of our students, I think, will be, they will feel more embraced because they'll go back to standing near a teacher, working with a teacher at a small group. I can probably quickly, and I probably don't even have to draw lines for you of how this connects to the data.
Can you explain to them what an interventionist is?
Yes, a K through 2nd interventionist is the first thing on the list, and then a 3 through 8 interventionist. Those are teachers who are reading teachers. They are special teachers to pull students small groups. So sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes it's 2 students, a small group maybe up to 3, but they're pulling students who have similar needs and working with them together on that need. Sometimes it's in the back of the classroom, sometimes it's outside of the classroom, but specifically these will be reading because reading's where Millside ISD and the rest of the state needs the most support. So it's very targeted on reading, and with reading you get your bigger bang for your buck as well, because if I can read, I can also oftentimes do math, do science, I can read those word problems. So an interventionalist is actually a teacher whose only focus is helping students in small group form and students who need specific academic help.
Would this be for ones that are also like 504 or, you know, things like dyslexic kids? I mean, I know, you know, we do have, you know, dyslexic specialists and stuff, but I mean, will that also play in for this as well, or would that be like a separate?
Okay, so it could be, certainly no one is excluded. We are writing some, we went to some MTSS training, multi-tiered support systems. How do we catch our students early who are needing help and which ones need the most help? So we'll actually have a system of how we do it that we're in the process of developing. Ms. Bradshaw and her team in the new, it's not a new job, but it's a new job description of a job that we have. It's a instructional support coordinator. It's supplemental, meaning additional instruction, supplemental instructional coordinator. And with the elementary, and that's actually on here, the supplemental instructional coordinator will work with the principals and the interventionalists. And because what's gonna happen, even though our data looks good, we have more kids than we're gonna have time to help. So we're gonna have to do a tier program. How are we gonna help them and when? And when we come out with that, we'll know. But we are not excluding anybody. I mean, we're not gonna say it's only for 504, but we're certainly not gonna say it's not.
So that person basically.
Taking lead on the work and the design, and of course, Mr. Dunlap, as the assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction, will have a big hand in that as well. Great question. So, and then you can see the summer camps and after school camps, of course, that's the additional time that people were talking about. We can create more time if kids will stay after school, and if our teachers want to teach, we can pay them a little extra. And then the summer camps is the more time as well.
Is there only a one elementary, one middle school, is that one for?
So what our data says now, says primary needs it most. And then our principals got together, looked at the data, talked about it. Our data also shows our intermediate grades, grades 3, 4, and 5 need some, and our middle school needs some. Right now, it's a shared position, but it depends. Our data won't be the same every year because if we're catching them when they're young, ideally what's going to be on happen in, let's say 2 years, by the time those kids get to middle school, they're going to be on target. So, yeah,
One person to interventionalist with.
right. So we have 2 interventionalists. I'm going to look at the front side. We have 2 interventionalists and we have 0 now. So it will not meet every kid's needs,
So
but it will go a long way in meeting kids' needs.
I'm sorry. I was just thinking of it really quick. It's 150,000, for example, for interventionalists. Is that the total for the 3 years?
Yes, sir. And that's approximate. I
Okay.
mean, again, it depends on who we get, benefits. Again, whatever we can't take care of with these funds, we do also have some local funds, some state funds, even other federal funds that we can combine with this. Part of the problem with some grants is, okay, how I said TEA took away some of the money that was supposed to, they replaced it. Well, usually we aren't allowed to do that with special funds like this, but actually they are allowing us to do that. So let's say if these funds cover all of that, then we're going to have even more from our normal funds to do even more. But if it's not enough, then we will still be able to implement the plan with what we have. But to Ms. Williams, what I was saying was, keep in mind, we already have some of that structure in place currently. So it's an additional interventionist with like another tier, another intervention. So like, say for instance, like right now, there's a paraprofessional interventionist
Gotcha.
job posted, or that kind of thing.
That's perfect because, from seeing the numbers, that's what's needed to catch up, right? Basically catch up from the small slide.
Right.
That is,
And that's really a good point. And also, in 2018, 4 years ago now, we were, if you want to put it in numbers, if you're a numbers person, we were behind the region. We're still behind the region. Now we're above the region and we're adding more supports. And so it's not that, like Ms. Lee said, this just shows we've been doing this all along. That's how we've made gains, but we're going to have some additional supports to help us.
I have a couple of gaps that I'm noticing with the STAR data and the end of course data, our high schoolers. It's a marathon, not a sprint, as far as targeting these younger ages. But what about our students that are at the high school? What kinds of, most of the numbers that I see here, I guess with the crisis intervention counselor, that covers all age groups, yes. But with our high schoolers and kind of the other side where I'm seeing a little bit of a gap is with our high achieving students. With our high achieving students, what kind of, I'm always looking for additional challenges. And our teachers continually rise to that, but is there any of this funding that could be targeted for those two sides of things, our high school students and our higher students?
Great question. Let me start with the first question. The first question she talked about was how to support our high school students, the ones that have gaps potentially. So we'll start there. This is our high school. I didn't show you. Our high school math, well, maybe I showed you quickly, is gaining ground. But we know our high school English is suffering a little bit. Now, I don't want you to think that this is purely because of COVID either, because we had a whole new staff, not a whole new staff. There were a lot of new teachers teaching these two courses this year. There's a lot of factors that play in, that being one of them. But if I wish I had it for you. I've also delineated the data by just elementary and just middle school and just high school. And the trend that we're seeing, and thanks to the elementary, they started propelling us multiple years ago to start the work. So the kids that were initially in third grade, when we really started the intense, we're going to get our kids academically to where everybody else's are. Those kids are now more like an 8th grade. There is a drastic gain in elementary this year, all the way through 8th grade, because those kids have had probably a different level of instruction or a different level of rigor for years. Those 8th grade kids are fixing to move into 9th grade. And so Miss Lee and I was just talking this week, maybe it was the last week, that these kids are going to bring to our high school a new level that we're going to have to meet academically. Because if we're teaching here, but our students are here, they're going to be losing academic rank. So definitely our rigor will have to continue to increase, and it will. And part of that will be because our kids are at a higher level and they're ready. And part of it will be our teachers' response to that. But educationally speaking, we know, and you've got to catch them early. If you send them with gaps up, you can never fill the gaps. So we're wanting to make sure we mitigate as many gaps as we can in the nature of the system. I say give it 8th grade, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, give us 4 more years, and there's no telling what else that's going to look like academically, because all students have received that level of instruction all the way through the system, which is really pretty neat. So we are definitely looking at that. In the high school, we take measures of academic progress in all your core contents, like your algebra, your English 1, and your English 2. And every single 3 times a year, we map student growth. You're talking about the higher level. We don't just want to fill in, although we talked a lot about that today. We just don't want to fill in. We're talking about filling in gaps, but that doesn't mean they're all low students. Some of our high students have academic gaps as well. They're a high performing student who makes straight A's, but they're only at an 8th grade level in this one skill. So we use measures of academic progress to help us catch those little holes in their instruction so that we can fill them in. Those students may also be seen by interventionists. You may have a high reader who can't spell. That was me in high school. I was a high comprehension reader, and back when we did the achievement test, I was always extremely low in spelling. If you know me, I'm still that way today. But so the interventionists are not simply for the low achieving, it's to fill in any academic gaps.
But here it is magnified. And you're right, it's not in the plan, in our high school, so is there?
Listen,
Yes.
is a supplemental,
Instruction for you.
Yes.
that is a district position, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
It's not just.
Yeah, it's just not taxed, but it's a district position.
So like an equivalent of a high school interventionist, would that kind of serve in that capacity? to a certain extent?
She's coordinating instruction. She's actually a high school teacher. We hired her from the high school. She is a high school ELA teacher. So her specialty is high school, but she will not necessarily be serving students on a high school, but she'll be making sure our instruction and our resources that they use are aligned and meeting their needs.
So she's just relating to the folks that are the interventionalists, K through 12 and 3rd grade.
Well, in summer camp and after school camp is all grades. It's at it's not just at the elementary or the middle, it's the elementary, middle, and high school. So it's really your interventionalists per se that are 8th grade and there.
And I'll say too, like just I said, I meet with each of the principals, periodically throughout the year, and then we're having our interview meetings right now. And that was actually one of the things that we did talk about in our high school meeting, was how, so our approaches continues to go up. Our meets continues to go up. Our master still is not going up to the highest level. And so we did talk about, we need to address that, how we need to address that, what are some things that we are going to do in the future to address that. So we did very specifically talk about that. I will also say though, we have talked as a district, we're very aware that, in my opinion, it is our, I'll say GT or high achieving students, that is the area where we still have the greatest need. That as far as, I think our program is the most black. And so it's very, very much on our radar that we need to offer more for into that group. So yes.
And it's probably both of them. I mean, it's probably the GT, it may also be the ESSER. You know, it's those kids who have very unique, distinct needs and that are.
So this intervention is for reading only, because I have a student who needs like extra time for tests and, you know, you get, I guess you say cheat sheets, and all some cheat sheets, but, you know.
There you go.
But I've noticed, you know, going from elementary to middle school, sometimes because he doesn't need as much help, because there's not enough aides over there to go around, because there's so much of a need in the middle school, and my concern is being that in 3rd through 8th grade individuals, you know, and I'm not saying there'll be a lot of need for that particular one person, but that's just a concern, because already now at the middle school, there's a lot of kids who need, you know, that extra little push or help, or, you know, and not all of them get it, because it's based on priority, who needs the most help, I guess you could say, you know. That's a concern with it being split between these separate campuses.
And so please do remember as well, we're talking in generalities, we're talking in systems. And when you're talking about your kids, you're talking very specifically, and we want to make sure we meet every kid's needs. If your student or if you know someone who's not getting their needs met, please send them to that campus principal, because we can redistribute as we need to. This is how it's currently written on paper, but like we talked about a while ago, it could be flexible, because one year we may have more kids needed here or more kids needed here. The part that is probably a little distinct is there's different skills for pre-K2 teachers. A pre-K2 teacher probably can go to the middle school and be effective. But this 3rd through 8th teacher, depending on where the needs are, they could probably start all middle school or all intermediate school and be very effective. So this is where we're looking at it right now, that there is certainly flexibility, and one year doesn't have to look like the other.
No, we also don't know yet, like specifically how many kids would be assigned. So let's say this 3-8 interventionist, if, you know, their work capacity to add other students in other areas, or, you know, we're gonna, every moment will be filled, that's for sure. But, you know, early in my superintendency, a superintendent told me, just remember, there's always gonna be more needs than money. And so what we have to do is prioritize. And one of those things that we use is the data and the feedback. Now, certainly that doesn't mean we're going to ignore other needs by any means. But again, this is on top of, and like I do know, we are adding, for instance, special education staff to the middle school this year. So we are adding some more there. And so we're constantly looking at where are those gaps and where are those needs and trying to fill those in, whether that be with local funds, other federal funds, state compensatory funds, funds like this. And then we'll also do the same thing that we have in the past. We will constantly monitor and adjust. And matter of fact, it's actually written into the law that we have to review this plan, and we have to review the the return to school plan every 6 months and make adjustments. And if something is recommended to be changed, we would go through this whole same process again. And again, that's part of the requirement as well. It's part of what Millsap always does, but it's in the requirement that before you change something, you go through the entire stakeholder process. Yet again.
I recommend it 3 months.
I'm sorry?
I recommend it in 3 months.
Well, I can tell you it's actually constant. You can ask, let's say, Ms. Bradshaw, I mean, she could name in 1 week, I mean, they have PLCs, where the teachers get together, talk about, you know, needs and kids and data and all of those stuff. I mean, it's a constant, but we're just talking like normally. It's required every 6 months, which actually, you know, we're looking at it. I think any staff members in here can tell you, we look at it,
Ms. Bradshaw has a great example this year, toward the end of the year. She needed some help. She hired a full-time person, a para, a professional, to help because her data shows she needs some extra help helping individual students. We just didn't use these funds for it, so we didn't come to a committee and talk about it. We saw a need, we met them. So that's going on all the time. This is just about the deal. Guys, thank y'all so much for coming. I know Ms. Lee's probably gonna sum us up, but if you have any other questions about the data, I'll be happy to show you. But thanks for being a part of this and helping us help these guys.
So let me ask you this. Kind of what Steve says here. How are we going to select those? I just want to know how that works out. Have we been?
Yeah,
Right, I mean,
every time we meet.
I'm the kind of person that I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want my time.
Absolutely.
But I'm here, right? So it's our responsibility to, as parents, and just as it is. We're almost these little kids that are going through these phases, especially with COVID, so we expect it. We just want the best, and that's what the intent is, right?
So, I mean, we will continue to move forward. We hope to apply for the grant at the end of this month. So this is one piece of the data. We had a public meeting for the board. We have all the survey data. We have our principals' data telling us what they think they need, which is where we came up with the reading. They decided that was what their kids needed. And so we will consolidate everything we know, and we will make a plan and submit it. But here, I'm sitting here thinking the whole time you were talking about the CTE stuff, like, we need to connect you with the high school CTE advisory. We need to connect Dr. Samatas with our GT. There's so many really awesome things that come out of these type of meetings, more than the single thing we're kind of looking at. So there's other ways that y'all can help us too. We can be of help to y'all when we want.
So in other words, we go back after meetings like this. That's why we take notes. Ms. Martin takes notes while I'm up there and vice versa. And then we take that back. And just like I talked about how, let's say the end of year surveys, we get the student, parent, and staff surveys on one campus where there are correlations, commonalities, and then we do that same thing from each campus or for each campus where there are commonalities. And then we take feedback like this. Actually, our favorite is the narrative feedback like this, just from discussions, even more so than a percentage marked this on the survey. But then all of that in combination with, as I said, this 18 months of data and input and all of it, and we put it all together. And then that's when, though, I will say there's hard decisions to make, that this is how much money we have. And so where are the priorities? And I will tell you, all the needs will not be met. It's impossible. But we're very, very, very thankful and blessed that we're about to have $1 million added to our budget for our kids. Now, granted, that's over 3 years, but still, we're very thankful for that. However, another thing, though, that this does is it allows us then to take some of the feedback, and maybe we don't have enough in these funds to do some of the things we talked about, But we can go back and look at our overall budget for all of the different funds that we have and our programs. And so where maybe do we need to relook and rethink? So let's say from Ms. Williams' input about at the middle school. So let's go back and have that conversation. Do we have some gaps? How can we rearrange or whatever, or what else can we do for our achieving kids? Or so in other words, we take it all back and we look at everything. So a meeting like this, it is not just about these funds. Yes, that's an application that we will be submitting very soon, but we are always in that process of preparing for the upcoming school year, but then also as we, like you see right there, the second one, adjust, review the plan and making adjustments. We constantly do that. It's called formative assessment, and you assess and you change, you assess, you adjust. So I can assure you, we take all the feedback, all of the data, all the documentation, and we constantly are making adjustments. It's one of the reasons why I'm in Millsap, in a former school district. I will just say, you know, you don't always feel like, whether it's somebody in life or it's a school district or a business, they're not always seeing how they can improve. Sometimes there's satisfaction. It's one of the reasons why your companies like Southwest Airlines or HEB rise to the top, because they are constantly looking for ways to be better. And it's one of the reasons why I came to Millsap and I've stayed in Millsap, chose to stay here until my retirement, because I do feel like, you know, we're never perfect. We can always get better. And we try. I mean, one of our mottos is better today than yesterday, better tomorrow than today. So that's why we appreciate y'all's input and your honesty, and we always want that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope we get all the minutes.
I know, yes, let's do, and even more. So anybody else, I don't want to leave, I mean, it's 5:54, there's still 6 minutes. So I don't want to leave anyone left with something they want to say, or a question that they have, or input to give. And as Ms. Martin said, we'll stay after if you have a specific question, if you would like to see specific data. I assure you, even if it's not right here with us, if it's data, Ms. Martin has it somewhere. I can almost guarantee it, or we can get it. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of like credentials do you expect your social emotional crisis intervention counselor to have?
So it is the, you really caught me off. License, yes, ma'am. I'll say it's a licensed.
Professional counselor.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, cool. I didn't know.
That is, as well as additional crisis training. And then, of course, for the school setting, the social emotional wellness piece, that's also in our strategic plan. For those of you who aren't familiar with our strategic plan, well, matter of fact, that's where this is from. Okay, so notice on strategy 2. I know it's kind of hard to see in the color, but I wanted y'all to see the color so you can see how we were implementing. But we will provide a comprehensive, safe educational environment to maximize student learning. Underneath each strategy, there are tactics. And one of our tactics is a comprehensive social emotional wellness program for students and staff. And so, in other words, even when these funds end, as long as this strategic plan is in place, until we've achieved it, we're going to keep working on it. And then even when we've achieved it, then it's time to update our strategic plan, which this is the 3rd strategic plan we've had since I've been here. So again, it's that constant search for improvement. We're never there. We never arrive. So we're always working towards that.
That summer camp, is that a requirement to get those monies?
And now, it's not a requirement to attend. Oh, do we have to have the summer camp in order to get the money? No, sir. However, you do have to use 20% of your funds to address the COVID gap, the learning gap, the needs. We are well above that.
And the reason I was asking was because there wasn't that high school, interventional list.
Right.
If those monies could be used for the high school, since there wasn't anything official there for that position, right?
And we do have some high school kids participating, but I would say that the need was much greater in the lower grades. A lot of high school also has to do with the credit achievement and some of those types of things. Other input questions? Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I tell you what, it is 5:58. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate all of your input and your time and honoring us with your time. And please take candy and goodies with you as you go out the door. And if you didn't sign in, or if you didn't put that your child was with you, when your child didn't sign in, we would love to have a record of that our child was with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for serving the district and.
Well, thank you.